We're diving into the fascinating world of hallucinogens, exploring their rich history and cultural context. From their prominent role in the 1960s psychedelic movement and the iconic Summer of Love, to the growing scientific interest in their potential medical uses, this presentation will take you through their complex journey. As you can see in the opening image, which channels the spirit of that vibrant era, hallucinogens are much more than just substances. They're a window into cultural shifts and emerging therapies. Let's explore how these compounds have influenced society and science alike. Here, we have an introduction to hallucinogens, which are substances known for altering a person's state of consciousness. These compounds come from a wide range of sources. Some are natural, derived from hundreds of different plant species, while others are created synthetically in laboratories. Historically, many cultures have used hallucinogens in religious and healing ceremonies, reflecting their deep cultural significance. Today, these traditional uses continue to inspire scientific research into their effects and potential benefits. To the right, the image shows a colorful assortment of dried herbs, flowers, and spices, symbolizing the natural origins of many of these substances and connecting that ancient heritage with modern study. Here we see the main classes of hallucinogens, each with distinct characteristics and examples. Starting with phenethylamines, which include mescaline and MDMA, these compounds are structurally similar to norepinephrine and typically influence mood and perception. Next, tryptamines like psilocybin and DMT resemble serotonin and are well known for altering sensory experiences. Moving on to ergolines, LSD is a prime example here, acting mainly on serotonin receptors to create vivid visual distortions. Dissociatives, such as PCP, work differently by blocking NMDA receptors, leading to feelings of detachment or dissociation from reality. Finally, atypicals like salvia divinorum have a unique mode of action, binding to kappa opioid receptors and producing distinct hallucinogenic effects. While these categories help us organize the different hallucinogens, it's important to remember that there's often overlap in how these substances affect the brain, given their complex interactions with neurotransmitter systems. Let's take a look at the key moments that have shaped the history of hallucinogens. It all starts with ancient times, where indigenous cultures used peyote and psilocybin mushrooms in religious and healing ceremonies, showing a deep-rooted cultural connection with these substances. Then, in 1943, Albert Hofmann made a groundbreaking discovery when he accidentally found LSD while studying compounds from the ergot fungus, opening a new chapter in scientific research. Moving into the 1950s and 60s, there was a surge of interest from both scientists and the military, and hallucinogens became a notable part of the wider cultural scene during this era. But in 1970, a major turning point occurred when the Controlled Substances Act classified these substances as Schedule I, imposing strict legal restrictions that drastically limited both their use and scientific study. Fast forward to recent years, and we see a renewed wave of clinical research focusing on the therapeutic potential of substances like LSD, MDMA, and psilocybin, despite ongoing legal challenges. This timeline really captures the evolving relationship society has had with these powerful compounds over time. Looking at hallucinogen use across different age groups, we see that young adults between 18 and 25 have the highest rates of past-year use, surpassing both adolescents and older adults. This makes them the key demographic for targeted prevention and education efforts. Moving beyond age, globally, there's been an increase in seizures of hallucinogens, with about 15% of these involving new psychoactive substances. Notably, ketamine and LSD are the most commonly seized compounds. Regionally, we're observing rising use of psilocybin in Canada and Australia, while several Western countries report increased use of DMT. These patterns give us valuable insight into how hallucinogen use is evolving, helping us better focus interventions and prepare for future trends. Here, we see how hallucinogens affect the brain at a fundamental level. First, these substances primarily act as agonists at serotonin 5-HT2A receptors, which means they bind to these receptors and alter the balance of neurotransmitters in the brain. This interaction is crucial because it sets off a cascade of changes in brain activity. Next, key brain regions are involved, particularly areas responsible for processing vision, like the visual centers, as well as the limbic system and the reticular activating system. These regions play essential roles in perception and emotion, So it's no surprise that hallucinogens profoundly influence how we see and feel. Finally, the subjective effects users experience include altered perception and shifts in their sense of self or ego. These effects aren't uniform. They vary widely depending on several factors such as the dose, the specific compound used, how it's administered, and the environment or psychological state of the individual. Rather than causing true hallucinations, hallucinogens tend to create perceptual distortions and a sense of ego disintegration, leading to those altered states of consciousness we associate with their use. Let's take a closer look at the key pharmacological properties of LSD. First, LSD is incredibly potent. It's estimated to be between 100 and 1,000 times more potent than natural hallucinogens. When taken orally, it's absorbed quickly and completely through the gastrointestinal tract, which means its effects start relatively fast. Now, even though the biological half-life of LSD is only about 2.5 to 3 hours, the subjective effects or the perceptual changes users experience can last much longer, typically between 12 to 18 hours. This is an interesting disconnect between how long the drug stays in the body versus how long its effects are felt. Another important point is tolerance. With continuous use over just 2 to 4 days, rapid tolerance develops, meaning users need higher doses to achieve the same effects. However, it's worth highlighting that LSD does not produce a classic withdrawal syndrome when use is stopped. On the right side, the colorful abstract pattern visually represents the complex biochemical interactions LSD induces in the brain, supporting this scientific discussion. This combination of potency, duration, and tolerance makes LSD pharmacologically unique among hallucinogens. Let's walk through the typical phases of an LSD experience. First, within minutes of ingestion, people usually feel an initial euphoria. This phase is marked by a release of inner tension, often accompanied by feelings of happiness, laughter, or even crying. It's a powerful emotional release that sets the tone for what follows. Next, about 30 to 90 minutes in, the second phase begins. This is characterized by perceptual changes, including visual illusions and a phenomenon called synesthesia, where senses intermingle, like seeing sounds or tasting colors. These sensory distortions can be fascinating but also disorienting. Finally, around 3 to 4 hours after taking LSD, the experience can shift into phase 3. Here, time distortion becomes prominent. Minutes might feel like hours, and some users may encounter ego disintegration, which can lead to panic or anxiety. This is often when a bad trip can happen, even for experienced users. It's important to understand that a bad trip isn't just random. It's influenced by factors like the user's expectations, the environment they're in, and their mental health. Managing these moments involves calm reassurance and talking the person down, with medication like benzodiazepines reserved for the most severe cases. Though rare, we also have to be alert for serious complications like activation of latent psychosis or seizures. Understanding these phases and risks helps us better support and manage individuals experiencing an LSD trip, promoting safety and care throughout the process. When we talk about the after effects of LSD, there are two main things to focus on: flashbacks and hallucinogen persisting perceptual disorder, or HPPD. On the left, we see the different types of symptoms people might experience. Perceptual symptoms often involve seeing things differently, like visual distortions or halos around objects. Some users also report physical effects such as dizziness and nausea, which fall under somatic symptoms. Emotionally, these after effects can cause anxiety or feelings of depersonalization, where someone might feel detached from themselves. Now, looking at the right side, it's important to understand how common flashbacks are and how they're managed. Studies show that between 5 and 77% of LSD users experience flashbacks. These typically occur within 6 months after use, but can sometimes happen years later. Triggers include stress, fatigue, using cannabis, or even exposure to bright lights. Thankfully, these episodes are usually managed with reassurance, and if needed, medications that reduce anxiety can help. The swirling, abstract image here helps to illustrate what these perceptual distortions might feel like: somewhat disorienting and surreal, much like the visual experiences during an LSD trip but persisting unexpectedly afterward. Understanding these after effects is crucial in providing proper care and support to those affected. Phencyclidine, or PCP, was originally developed in 1957 as a surgical anesthetic. However, it was discontinued for human use because it caused severe adverse effects like delirium and psychotic reactions. Despite this, PCP continued to be used as a veterinary anesthetic until 1978. Moving to its misuse patterns, PCP first appeared as an illicit drug during the 1960s and 70s. While its popularity peaked during that time, today it is only occasionally misused. More commonly, PCP is found as an adulterant in other drugs, which significantly raises the risk of unintentional exposure. People commonly use PCP through smoking, oral ingestion, snorting, or injection. Epidemiological data show that lifetime use in the United States remains relatively low, under 2.4%, and is mostly concentrated within specific populations. This makes understanding its history and current patterns crucial for addressing its ongoing impact. On this slide, we delve into the pharmacological actions of PCP and how it affects the brain. First, PCP primarily acts as an antagonist at the NMDA receptor, which disrupts glutamate function. This disruption is what leads to the classic dissociative effects, where users experience a detachment from reality. Beyond that, PCP also acts as an agonist at sigma-opioid receptors. This interaction tends to produce dysphoric effects, meaning users often feel unpleasant or negative emotions. Additionally, PCP binds to cannabinoid receptors, which plays a significant role in its hallucinogenic effects and altered sensory perceptions. Taken together, these receptor actions explain why PCP use results in behaviors such as analgesia, dissociation, aggression, and even psychosis. Understanding these mechanisms helps clarify the complex and intense experiences associated with PCP. Here we see the complications and risks associated with different doses of PCP use. At the lower end, between 1 and 5 milligrams, users may exhibit aggression and symptoms similar to alcohol intoxication. As the dose increases to between 5 and 10 milligrams, these effects can intensify, with added analgesia and sometimes anesthesia. When we reach doses of 10 milligrams or higher, the risks become much more severe. This includes dangerous arrhythmias that can be fatal, as well as coma, sometimes with the eyes remaining open. It's crucial for clinicians to recognize this range of symptoms and understand how they correlate with dosage in order to provide the appropriate care and intervention for individuals experiencing PCP intoxication. MDMA, also known as ecstasy, was first isolated over a century ago in 1912, but it remained mostly a laboratory curiosity for several decades. It wasn't until the 1950s that the U.S. Army started looking into its toxicity, and by the mid-1960s, some psychotherapists began experimenting with MDMA for therapeutic use. This early interest eventually gave way to its rise as a popular recreational drug in the 1970s. Since then, MDMA's popularity has grown significantly worldwide. Production has increased on a global scale, and millions of people report using it each year. In the United States, it remains especially popular among young people, with high rates of past-year use, although we have seen a slight decline recently, partly due to the pandemic. The image on the left side visually reflects the vibrant and dynamic culture associated with MDMA. Understanding this history helps us see how MDMA evolved from a niche psychotherapeutic tool to a widely used party drug, with important social and health implications. MDMA produces noticeable effects within 30 to 60 minutes after ingestion, including feelings of euphoria, increased empathy, heightened energy, and mild changes in perception. These effects largely explain why the substance has gained popularity. However, it's important to recognize the acute risks associated with MDMA use. These include hyperthermia, hydration problems, high blood pressure, and potentially fatal cardiac arrhythmias. Because of these serious risks, caution is essential. On a more hopeful note, ongoing clinical research is exploring MDMA's potential as a treatment aid for conditions like PTSD and anxiety. Scientists are investigating how it might help in therapeutic settings, which shows a promising medical application despite the inherent dangers. Salvia divinorum has a rich history of use in religious and healing ceremonies, particularly in central Mexico and South America. This traditional use highlights its cultural and spiritual significance. The active compound responsible for its effects is salvinorin A, which is unique because it acts as a kappa opioid receptor agonist, unlike many other hallucinogens that primarily target serotonin receptors. People commonly consume salvia by smoking it, chewing the leaves, or drinking it as a brewed tea. The effects are quite brief, typically lasting anywhere from 30 seconds up to 30 minutes, depending on how much is taken and the method of use. Users often report intense subjective experiences, including dissociation, hallucinations or visions, mood swings, and a feeling of merging with their surroundings. Interestingly, preliminary clinical research suggests that salvia and its analogs might have potential analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties, which opens the door for future medicinal applications. This makes Salvia divinorum not only culturally significant, but also a promising area for ongoing scientific investigation. Here we see the DSM-5-TR's approach to diagnosing hallucinogen and PCP use disorders. Notably, PCP is classified separately from other hallucinogens, reflecting its unique properties and effects. The manual identifies 9 distinct subcategories, including various forms of intoxication, use disorders, and induced mental disorders, as well as persisting perception disorder and unspecified related conditions. The diagnostic criteria emphasize core features like developing tolerance, experiencing cravings, spending significant time obtaining or using the substance, and continuing use despite physical risks. The image here highlights the critical role of thorough clinical evaluation, ensuring diagnoses are made carefully and accurately according to these guidelines. Here, we focus on the legal status of hallucinogens and how it impacts research. Most of these substances are classified as Schedule I. This means they are considered illegal and without accepted medical use, which poses a big barrier for clinical research. Because of this Schedule I classification, access to these compounds is heavily restricted. Researchers must navigate complex approval processes, and the supply available for scientific studies is limited. All of these factors slow down progress in understanding and developing medicinal applications. The image of the microscope highlights this intersection between legal hurdles and the pursuit of scientific knowledge. Despite these challenges, there have been some promising shifts recently that allow for controlled studies on compounds like MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for anxiety at the end of life. This slide captures the delicate balance we face when it comes to hallucinogens, the risks they pose alongside their promising potential for medicine. First, we still have significant knowledge gaps, especially regarding their pharmacology and the long-term effects they may have. Addressing these unknowns is critical for moving forward. Clinical research is a priority now, focused on exploring their therapeutic uses and developing safer ways to administer these compounds, possibly as part of treatment adjuncts. At the same time, public health concerns cannot be overlooked. We need to pay close attention to misuse trends, particularly among young people, and keep track of new hallucinogenic substances entering the market. However, legal restrictions present major challenges, often limiting comprehensive investigation and slowing the development of medicinal applications. Despite these hurdles, there's a hopeful future ahead. Innovative studies are underway that could unlock novel therapies while carefully managing the risks associated with these compounds. This balanced approach is essential as we continue to navigate this complex field. Now, let's open the floor for questions and discussion. We can explore important themes such as harm reduction strategies, which are crucial in minimizing risks associated with hallucinogen use. We'll also delve into the ethical considerations that arise in this field of research. It's a complex area, especially given the evolving landscape of clinical applications for these compounds. On the other side, we have valuable references and resources to guide further learning, including reports from SAMHSA on hallucinogen use, DSM-5-TR criteria related to hallucinogen disorders, and updated data from the United Nations on global trends. The image here, with speech bubbles and question marks, really captures the spirit of this session, encouraging open dialogue and thoughtful inquiry. I invite you all to share your thoughts, ask questions, and engage with these important topics.